My 19-year-old sister tried to force me to have an abortion so she could be the first grandchild. After 7 months of failed attempts, my husband Kyle and I finally announced we were pregnant. We'd gathered both our families for Sunday dinner at my parents' house, and when we made the announcement, everyone erupted with cheers and congratulations. Everyone except my sister Jacqueline. She was standing by the kitchen counter holding a wine glass when I said the words, and I watched her face go from confused to furious in about 2 seconds. Then she just smashed the glass against the marble counter. It shattered everywhere, red wine splashing across the white surface, and the entire room went silent. "How dare you?" she shrieked at me across the room. "You know how long I've been trying for a baby? I deserve to be the first one." I just stood there stunned because Jacqueline is 19 years old. 19. She's been with her boyfriend for maybe 6 months, and they're not even engaged. My mom tried to step in, telling her that 19-year-olds aren't ready for babies, that she needs to finish college first, but Jacqueline wasn't having it. She grabbed her purse off the chair and started storming toward the door, but then she turned around and pointed at me. "You better abort that baby within 1 week," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Or else I'm getting the police involved." Then she was gone, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. Everyone just stared at each other in shocked silence. My mom started apologizing, saying Jacqueline had been under a lot of stress lately, that she didn't mean it. But I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew something was seriously wrong with my sister. The next morning, Kyle and I were still in bed when the doorbell started ringing. It was barely 7 in the morning. Kyle went to answer it in just his boxers, and I heard Jacqueline's voice immediately. Loud. Demanding. I pulled on a robe and went to see what was happening, and there she was on our front porch, holding a stack of printed pages and shoving them at Kyle's chest. "I made appointments for her at 3 different places," she announced. And she wasn't just talking to us. She was practically yelling it so the whole cul-de-sac could hear. "She just needs to pick one." I looked at the papers. They were information packets from abortion clinics. 3 of them, with appointment times already scheduled. For me. Without my consent or knowledge. Kyle tore them up right there on the porch. Just ripped them into pieces and let them fall to the ground. Jacqueline's face went red, and she started screaming about how we were ruining her life, how this was supposed to be her moment, how I was stealing everything from her. Our neighbors were definitely watching by then. Mrs. Patterson next door was standing in her front yard pretending to check her mailbox, but clearly listening to every word. After Jacqueline finally left, I thought that would be the end of it, that she'd cool down and realize how crazy she was being. But that same day, she called every single member of our extended family and demanded an emergency intervention. She told them I was making a terrible mistake and that the family needed to talk sense into me before it was too late. That Sunday, 23 relatives crammed into my mom's living room. My aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, everyone. Jacqueline stood at the fireplace like she was about to give a TED Talk, and I swear to God, she actually had a PowerPoint presentation. She'd made slides about why I was destroying her life by having a baby first, with bullet points and everything. She went through her entire argument. How she'd always dreamed of being the first to give our parents a grandchild. How she'd been tracking her ovulation for months. How I knew this was important to her, and I'd gotten pregnant anyway just to spite her. She was crying by the end of it, mascara running down her face, talking about how betrayed she felt. Our Uncle Jeffrey, who's a lawyer, finally stood up and cleared his throat. "Jacqueline," he said in this very calm, professional voice, "there is no legal precedent for forcing someone to terminate a pregnancy because you want to be pregnant first. That's not how any of this works." But Jacqueline just pointed at me with tears streaming down her face. "If she doesn't terminate by Monday, I'm never speaking to any of you again. Any of you who support her are dead to me." I looked around the room at all these people I'd known my whole life, and I waited to see who would take her side, who would actually suggest I should abort my baby to make my teenage sister feel better. But one by one, they all shook their heads. My mom spoke first. "Jacqueline, honey, you need help. Professional help. This isn't normal." And then my dad, my uncles, my aunts, they all started agreeing, telling her she was being unreasonable, that she needed to get therapy, that this wasn't about her. Uncle Jeffrey looked at her and said, very quietly, "See you, Felicia." And then everyone else said it. All 23 of us. "See you, Felicia." Jacqueline left sobbing. Literally ran out of the house with her hands over her face. And we didn't hear from her for a long time after that. Not a call, not a text, nothing. My mom tried reaching out a few times, but Jacqueline had blocked everyone. 7 months passed. My pregnancy progressed normally. Kyle and I found out we were having a girl. We picked out a name, set up the nursery, did all the normal excited parent things. And honestly, without Jacqueline's constant drama, it was actually peaceful. I almost started to relax. Then came my baby shower. My mom had organized it at her house with all my friends and family. We were halfway through opening presents when the front door flew open. No knock, no warning, just flew open. And there was Jacqueline. She walked in with her hand on a massive belly. I mean huge. She was obviously very pregnant. And she was wearing a shirt that said "First Grandchild Loading" in big letters across her stomach. Everyone in the room went silent. My mom actually dropped the cake knife she was holding, and it clattered onto the floor.
Surprise!
Jacqueline announced, spinning around slowly so everyone could see her belly from all angles. I'm almost due. I got pregnant right after that horrible meeting where you all betrayed me. I'm 10 weeks away from giving birth. She was looking right at me, with this triumphant smile on her face. Like she'd won some competition I didn't even know we were having. Nobody knew what to say. The room was just completely silent except for someone's phone buzzing. I decided to mess with her a little bit. "Oh, that's nice," I said, keeping my voice casual. "My due date is in 8 weeks. I watched her face turn deep red, like actually red with anger. She crossed the room and grabbed my arm, hard enough that it hurt, and leaned in close to whisper in my ear. "The dates don't matter," she hissed. "I'll make sure mine comes first." Then she let go and walked out. Just left without saying another word to anyone. The whole baby shower was ruined after that. People tried to act normal, but everyone was clearly shaken. My mom was crying. My friends were asking if I was okay. Kyle wanted to call the police right then, but I told him to wait. I didn't know what Jacqueline meant by what she'd said, but I had a bad feeling about it. That Tuesday, my mom called me. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. She'd gotten a call from Jacqueline's roommate. Jacqueline was in the ICU. My first thought was something had gone wrong with the pregnancy naturally, but it was so much worse than that. My mom had found out from the roommate that Jacqueline had been taking black market labor induction substances she bought from some sketchy website in Romania. She'd been risking her baby's life, taking pills designed to force early labor, all so she could deliver before me. But that's not even what landed her in the ICU. Turns out Jacqueline had found some girl on Craigslist. This girl's mother used to be a midwife in the Philippines, and Jacqueline paid her to perform a C-section in her living room. In her living room. The girl kept refusing, telling Jacqueline she was only 31 weeks pregnant, that the baby wasn't ready, that this was insane and illegal. But Jacqueline threatened to do it herself with kitchen knives if the girl didn't help her. They used box cutters. Box cutters sterilized with vodka. And Jacqueline lost so much blood that her neighbor saw it seeping under the apartment door. That's how the ambulance got called. The neighbor thought someone was being murdered. The baby somehow came out alive, but he was purple and barely breathing. Both of them nearly died in the ambulance. The baby went straight to the NICU on a ventilator, and Jacqueline needed a full hysterectomy. She bled out so badly that they had to remove her uterus to save her life. At 19 years old, she'd never be able to have another child. When she woke up from surgery, the first thing she did was call me from her hospital bed. I saw her name on my phone, and my hand shook as I answered. Her voice came through the oxygen mask they had her on, weak and gasping. "You did this," she said. "My baby is dying because you couldn't wait for me to have a child first." I hung up. I just hung up the phone and sat there shaking. Kyle held me while I cried, because what do you even do with that? How do you respond to someone who's that far gone? The craziest part is that now that Jacqueline was fighting for her life, suddenly the family was split down the middle. Half of them thought she'd completely lost her mind and needed serious psychiatric help. But the other half actually thought I should have delayed announcing my pregnancy to spare her feelings. One aunt even said I should have just aborted when Jacqueline first asked, as if that was a reasonable request. But everyone agreed on one thing. We all needed to be there for the sick baby in the NICU. And suddenly my pregnancy got pushed to the side. I didn't mind too much at first because the baby was innocent in all this. But it sucked how every time I mentioned anything about my own pregnancy or birth plan, someone would redirect the conversation to Jacqueline and her baby. It was like my baby didn't matter anymore. 3 days before my due date, my doctor admitted me to the hospital for monitoring. My blood pressure had been creeping up, and she wanted to keep an eye on me. They put me in a room on the maternity ward, and I tried to relax. But Jacqueline's baby was still in the NICU, which was in the same hospital. The doctors were saying the next 48 hours would determine if he'd survive. His lungs were so underdeveloped, and there'd been complications from the surgery. I could see Jacqueline through my doorway sometimes. She'd been released from the ICU, but wasn't well enough to go home, so she was staying in a room on the surgical floor. But she kept coming down to walk the halls between the NICU and the maternity ward. And she wasn't looking at the rooms or watching the nurses go by. She was staring directly at my belly with this expression I'd never seen on her face before. It scared me. The next morning, they told me they'd be inducing me. The blood pressure wasn't coming down, and they didn't want to risk waiting any longer. Jacqueline knew. She'd somehow found out the exact time. She'd been asking the nurses questions about the delivery room locations and whether babies were ever left unattended. One of the nurses had reported her to security, but nothing had been done yet. Ka was freaking out. The NICU was 1 floor below the maternity ward. If Jacqueline's baby didn't make it through the night, he was terrified about what she might do when ours was born healthy in the morning. The clock showed 3 in the morning when I woke up to Kyle's voice in the dark. He was already on his phone talking to someone about Jacqueline. He was pacing by the window, explaining how she'd been watching the hallways and timing how long nurses stayed in each room. The charge nurse on the other end promised to add a special security code to my chart and alert the whole night shift. But Kyle wasn't satisfied. His voice kept getting louder as he demanded specific names of who would protect us and exactly what they'd do if Jacqueline tried to get near our baby. His hands were shaking as he wrote down names on the hospital notepad. He was asking about door locks and panic buttons and whether security could physically stop someone from entering our room. The nurse kept trying to calm him down, but Kyle wanted a meeting with hospital security before my induction started at 8 in the morning. Within an hour, there was a knock on our door. A man in a security supervisor badge came in carrying a thick folder. His name was Francis Bergman. He walked us through every single safety measure the hospital had. He showed us pictures of the electronic badges that tracked everyone's location. He explained how the infant security tags would trigger an automatic lockdown if anyone tried to remove them or take a baby past certain doors. Francis took out his phone and had me send him the clearest photo I had of Jacqueline. He said he'd distribute it to every security guard on every shift with instructions to watch for her. He showed us the officer assigned to the maternity ward and gave us his direct number. He promised someone would check on us every hour once labor started. At 5 in the morning, another knock. A woman from social services named Olympia Hicks came in with a clipboard full of forms. She needed to document all the threats Jacqueline had made for potential CPS involvement. She sat in the uncomfortable visitor chair asking detailed questions about every interaction, every threat, every time Jacqueline had mentioned our baby. My face burned with embarrassment having to tell a complete stranger about my family's mess. Olympia explained the process for getting an emergency restraining order. She said she could start the paperwork right now, and a judge could issue it before the baby was even born. My phone started buzzing nonstop. My mom had apparently told everyone in the family group chat about the security measures. Half my cousins thought I was being dramatic and overreacting. The other half started sharing stories I'd never heard before about times Jacqueline had scared them. My aunt sent 3 paragraphs about how Jacqueline had keyed her car after not being invited to a party in high school. My cousin mentioned finding Jacqueline going through her purse at Christmas looking for birth control pills to throw away. Uncle Jeffrey sent a private text saying he knew a detective who could fast-track a police report if we needed one. I hesitated, worried about making everything worse. But Kyle grabbed my phone and typed back, "Yes, please," in all caps before I could stop him. A nurse rushed into our room, looking worried. She told us Jacqueline's baby had taken a bad turn overnight. His oxygen levels had dropped so low they'd had to increase the ventilator support and add more medications. The next few hours were critical. And despite everything Jacqueline had done, I felt my chest tighten thinking about that tiny baby struggling to breathe because his mother couldn't wait 2 more months. The morning shift nurse came in at 7 and went over the whole delivery room setup with us. She pointed out on a map where each nurse would be stationed. She emphasized that babies were never, ever left alone. She showed us the matching ID bands we'd all wear with special numbers that had to match exactly, or alarms would go off. She promised to personally stay in the room through the entire delivery, no matter how long it took. I grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down exactly 4 names of people allowed to visit us. Kyle, my mom, Uncle Jeffrey, and Kyle's mother. I handed it to Francis with very specific instructions that nobody else should even be told what room we were in or whether the baby had been born yet. Francis took it seriously. He made me initial next to each name and asked for physical descriptions so his team could verify identities. Kyle pulled me into the bathroom and closed the door. His whole body was shaking. He admitted he was terrified he'd freeze up if Jacqueline actually showed up during delivery, that he wouldn't be able to protect us when it really mattered. We held each other in that tiny hospital bathroom, both of us trying not to cry. Then Francis knocked on the bathroom door. When we opened it, he was standing there with his clipboard. Jacqueline had just tried getting past the main security desk using a visitor pass from yesterday. She told the guards she needed to check on her baby, but they recognized her from the photo and walked her straight back to the NICU waiting area. They'd warned her that one more attempt would mean removal from the hospital completely. I could barely process what Francis was saying because Olympia knocked and came in right behind him. She sat on the edge of the hospital bed and started filling out forms for mandated reporting. Every threat Jacqueline had made was going into an official record that would trigger automatic CPS review once my baby arrived. The paperwork felt both reassuring and deeply sad. My own sister was being documented as a threat to my child. My mom showed up while Olympia was still there. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She started crying the second she saw all the official paperwork. She kept saying she was sorry for the family pressure, but then in the same breath, she said she couldn't choose between her daughters and hoped I understood. "You don't have to choose," I told her. "You just have to respect my boundaries and keep Jacqueline away from us." She nodded, but I could see in her eyes she didn't really get it.
My phone rang.
It was Detective Cyrus Powell, Uncle Jeffrey's contact. He was opening an investigation into the illegal surgery and needed details about any threats Jacqueline had made. I put him on speaker while Kyle held my hand because the contractions had started. The contractions got stronger, more regular. The nurse checked me and said it was time to move to the delivery room. They wheeled me down the hall with Kyle jogging alongside, and Francis, walking ahead checking every doorway. The delivery room was bright and cold. They explained all the security stuff again. Showed us the wristbands and the ankle tag that would go on the baby. The anesthesiologist came in to check my epidural. The doctor said we were ready to start pushing. I pushed and pushed while Kyle held my hand and counted with me. Everything hurt, but I was determined to get my baby here safely. At 7:23 in the morning, she came out screaming. They put her right on my chest, all wet and warm and perfect. Kyle started crying, and the nurse immediately snapped those security bands on her tiny ankle and my wrist. For those few minutes, nothing else existed except her little face and Kyle's tears and the weight of her on my chest. Within an hour, they moved us to a recovery room way down at the end of the hall, away from the elevators. Francis made sure our names weren't posted anywhere. Kyle pulled the nurse aside, and they worked out a code word. If we said pineapple, it meant to immediately take the baby to the locked nursery, no questions asked. My phone started blowing up with messages from family demanding pictures. Kyle grabbed it and typed one message, saying we were taking private time to bond. The responses flooded in. People calling us selfish and dramatic. Kyle turned my phone off and put it in the drawer. Cyrus knocked and asked me to give an official statement. He kept it short, since I was exhausted. He mentioned the girl who did the surgery would definitely face charges. He left, and then a doctor came to give us an update on Jacqueline's baby. He was stable but still critical. The next day would determine if there was brain damage from being born so early. I held my healthy daughter closer and felt sick with relief, mixed with guilt. Kyle's mom texted that she saw something on social media. When Kyle checked, there was a post from Jacqueline saying I'd stolen her thunder and ruined her life. She tagged every family member. The post had pictures of her in the hospital bed with captions about how I'd forced her to take desperate measures and now her baby might die because of my selfishness. Kyle immediately took screenshots and added them to our evidence folder. Francis came back to tell us someone had been calling the nurse's station pretending to be different family members, trying to get our room number. They couldn't provide the security code, so no information was given. We didn't get more than 2 hours of sleep at a time those first few nights home. Every car that drove past made us both freeze and listen. The doorbell rang on our third day home, and we panicked until we saw Cyrus through the peephole. He brought a security camera system that some victim fund had paid for. He spent 2 hours installing it and showing us how to check the feed from our phones. The next morning, I found a cardboard box on our porch. The security camera showed my mom had left it at 5 in the morning. Inside were baby clothes from when Jacqueline and I were little. Her note said she loved us but needed time to process everything. She promised to respect our boundaries. I cried holding those tiny outfits, remembering when things were simple. That afternoon, the hospital called. Jacqueline's baby had started breathing on his own for 15 minutes at a time. His brain scans looked better than expected. The prognosis had shifted from critical to serious, but stable. 4 days later, Kyle's phone rang at 2 in the morning. The voicemail was Jacqueline's voice, shaky and furious. She rambled for 3 minutes about how we'd destroyed her life and stolen her baby's future. Kyle called Cyrus immediately. She must have used another patient's phone, violating the restraining order. The restraining order hearing was that Friday. The judge appeared on our laptop screen and reviewed all the evidence. After 20 minutes, he extended it to a full year with criminal penalties if violated. 2 weeks later, Olympia called. They'd found placement for Jacqueline's baby with his father's parents in Oregon. They were stable and financially secure. They'd take custody as soon as the baby was medically cleared. We were officially removed from consideration as caregivers. Kyle scheduled a video call with the extended family to set clear boundaries. He explained we'd send one monthly update email but wouldn't respond to individual texts or calls. No surprise visits. Anyone who shared information with Jacqueline would be cut off completely. My mom called 3 days later. She'd signed up for therapy and found a support group for families dealing with relatives who have mental illness. She started keeping a journal of all the times she'd made excuses for Jacqueline's behavior. Cyrus called that Friday. The unlicensed surgeon had taken a plea deal. 5 years in state prison. Jacqueline would face her own charges once doctors cleared her as mentally competent, which could take months. I found a new parents group at the library. Just 8 moms with babies, talking about normal stuff like diaper rash and whether organic formula was worth the money. Nobody knew about my sister or the restraining order. I felt like a regular person for the first time in months. The psychiatric facility called to inform us they were transferring Jacqueline to a specialized long-term treatment center 2 hours away. She'd be there for at least 6 months with strict visiting policies. Kyle sat down with his laptop and created a family communication system. 1 group email per week with basic updates. No individual contact unless there was an actual emergency. The system felt cold, but necessary. I pumped extra milk every morning, and Kyle would drive it to the hospital for the NICU donation program. We never visited Jacqueline's baby directly, but this felt like the right amount of help. During a 2 feeding, I held my daughter against my chest and felt her tiny heartbeat. The family drama wasn't fixed and probably never would be completely. But we'd built walls around our little family that felt strong enough to protect her from the chaos. My phone sat silent on the nightstand. No angry texts or guilt trip voicemails. Just peaceful darkness and the soft sounds of my baby breathing. And for now, that was enough.
Alright, I'm out. But the next story is already on the way.